And we're rolling. Hello, good morning, and welcome, beautiful people. My name is Jonna. This is Josh. And what we have for you today, Nutrition Basics 101. So, we're going to go through some things that aren't like necessarily macronutrients, like eat this, not that kind of stuff, but more about the overall difference between fake foods versus like real whole foods. And we don't mean like the store whole foods, but like actual whole, like one ingredient kind of foods.
Yeah.
And so, we're going to take you through what the day looks like. It's probably going to be 60 minutes, probably not 90, but we've got space. So we want to make this valuable for you. So if you have questions, there is a Q&A box. So make sure that you can pop your questions in there. You can use the chat if you want. I'll be kind of looking at it. And Josh is going to be the one that's primarily telling you about, all the stuff we have today. And then at the end, whenever we have a Q&A actual portion, we'll open the floor up so that you can pop in questions. We can have more of like a conversation. But first, we're going to just run through some things that we think are really important that you all should know. So with that being said, um, welcome and what we can expect. We're going to talk about real versus fake foods, what the problems are with those fake foods. We're going to go over some things about food companies that aren't really common knowledge, talk about some awarenesses that we think everyone should have, and then we're going to talk about how to move closer to health. And then there's going to be that Q&A and like closing. So who are we? Like I said, my name is Jonna. This is Josh. And I'll let Josh like speak for himself. But he's going to be the one that's primarily, like I said, like taking us through all this. I am a life coach, so I'm more of like the mental aspect, like those false beliefs, like why can't I make these changes when I know that they're good for me, kind of thing. And so we can talk about that later. We could do an Instagram live on that if you're interested. Just let us know. But like I said, primarily today, we're going to be talking about nutrition because that is Josh's area of expertise. And so, with that being said, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then we'll dive right in.
I am nobody. That's who I am. No, but like I have a just a history of like being in fitness, sports, things of that nature. A few years ago, I was able to kind of get more into the nutrition side of things and meal planning side of things and be able to help people in that area. I figured out like even just with personal knowledge I gained on my own and knowledge that I've gained from like higher education that a lot of things that knew were facts weren't common knowledge. Like I assume like, hey, people know this stuff and they really don't. And so that kind of put me in a mode of like, hey, I want to just keep growing and growing in the area of like nutrition. So that way I can help other people that may not, be willing to spend the time to kind of explore, what eating healthy really means and how that can apply to their lives. And so that's what I want to help people do because I really do think people want to take care of their bodies. I think there's different reasons why they don't. Foods like sugar are addictive, so it's really hard for people, to get off of sugar. Processed foods are, meant to be addictive, so it's hard to get off of those things. So I think that's one, reason why people have a tough time transitioning to eating, foods that are better for their body. But I think another thing is that people just need guidance. They need someone to kind of lead them and show them how to do it. And I really think that if we give them the information, we come alongside them that, people can build a better foundation of, food knowledge, not only as it pertains to them personally, but to their family too as well, because that's how we really see the change, especially for the Black community who is more susceptible to chronic disease and food insecurities.
Yeah. So I'm excited to learn more about this. I think you're a wealth of knowledge. Um, and yeah, one thing that you said, I mean, you said a lot of things there that was important. This is information that a lot of people don't know because I think a lot of times we get caught up in like the fitness aspect of it. We think that health is like that person with like the six pack and like the biceps, and we go for that, not knowing what really counts. Like they could be super sick, like they could have like really bad nutrition, and they could have like these autoimmune diseases, they could have all these different things because they're not like doing the things they need for their body.
Yeah,
And that's not what health is. And
yeah,
so we're going to shine some light on that today. because it
Sure.
really is all about how you're fueling your body.
For sure.
So with that being said, oh, go ahead.
No, no, I was just gonna kind of jump right in to probably the most important thing, and that is being able to separate real food from fake food. What does that even mean? And I think some people may not really understand that, and that is completely okay. Some people may get it. This may be simple for some of you guys, and you're like, okay, I already know this. Like we'll get a little bit deeper, but for those of you who don't really know the difference between what real food is and fake food is, like real food is one ingredient. It is not man-made. It's made from the earth. And so you think about things like, broccoli. Like broccoli is broccoli. Like that's it. There's nothing else to it. There's no mystery. Like if you buy a head of broccoli at the grocery store in the produce section, there's no ingredients list because that is the only ingredient, broccoli. And so steak is steak, ground beef is ground beef. And unless you're buying things that have hormones, and we'll get into hopefully buying organic, grass fed, things that have minimal intervention. And so whenever you think about the reproduction of cattle, things like cows, bison, anything that is meat or cattle raised, as long as it doesn't have hormones, antibiotics, it's sustainably raised, it is fed its natural diet. Like those are real foods. And so whenever you think about real food, just think about one ingredient, and that's it. It is what it is. It's nothing else to it. Fake foods, on the other hand, have multiple ingredients. They're man-made. These are things that are made in factories, and it's crazy because like if you really start paying attention, like and if you don't get anything else, from this, like take this and run with it. Whenever you go to the grocery store, just start looking at the ingredients list of some of the things that you're buying. Like a lot of the crap, like you can't even pronounce, you have no clue what it is. And so I think it's important just to at least have the awareness of like, hey, like I'm eating something that I have no clue what it is, where it came from. And a lot of times these things are created in factories by people. They're found in boxes and heavily branded packaging. Things like Oreos, like you even if you look at like grab a box of cheese, it's like you would think like, oh, that's simple, it's cheese and like all this other, like it doesn't even have cheese in it. Like there's no cheese in cheese, it's like it's fake cheese. It's like nothing, there's nothing real about any of those foods. And so um I guess some people may have the question, okay, we can distinguish between real foods and fake foods, but like what is the issue with a diet or lifestyle of fake foods? And so, and me and you have talked about it, to kind of get off subject just a little bit, about like diet and lifestyle. Like diet has this like negative connotation attached to it, but it really shouldn't, but I get why it does. Because a diet means what you eat, like the food that you're consuming. I think because of diet fads and so many options of people just kind of jumping to different things, that we have kind of like this diet culture that has been created because there's so many options, and some of those options aren't great options. And I get why people are like, hey, diet culture is bad because we shouldn't focus on restricting calories so much and all this. Like, I get that. But diet actually really means like the food you eat. And so when I try to transition and say lifestyle more, because that insinuates that that's my lifestyle. We want to create a food foundation that is sustainable for the rest of our lives. So the way I eat right now, I can sustain it for the rest of my life if I choose to. This is nothing that is temporary. And most people that know me know I've been eating healthy pretty much most of my life. And now I'm becoming a little bit more strict on myself as I get older, because I don't want to become victim to chronic disease in 10, 15, 20 years because of the decisions that I'm making today. So now that we kind of distinguish between like diet and lifestyle, so fake foods, processed foods, they're harmful to our health, and they are the root cause of chronic disease. And so we'll get into like fat later, and a few other things that may be the thing that you think of whenever you think about unhealthy or chronic disease, but it's really fake food, it's processed foods. The reason is because fake foods are high in sugars, and sugars are carbs. Like if you didn't know that, carbs are three things: they're sugars, starches, and fiber. And so whenever you look at a nutrition label and it says carbs, those carbs are coming from somewhere. And so typically, whenever we talk about processed foods, those carbs are coming from sugar. So one thing, fake foods, processed foods are high in sugar. They're high in omega 6 fatty acids, which come from vegetable oils, which we'll get into later, which is super deceiving because whenever you see like vegetable oil or sunflower oil or safflower oil or all these different oils that you read the name and you're like, oh, like vegetable oil, that's gotta be healthy, but it's not. 9 times out of 10, those oils are they use deodorizers on those oils. They're exposed to high heats and other chemicals, so that they have higher shelf lives. There's all these things that go into the oils that are in these foods, that make the fats in them extremely harmful. And trans fat is another one of those things that makes it harmful too as well, that is found in vegetable oils and fake foods. And so whenever you think about processed foods, whenever you think about fake foods, these are foods that are high in pretty much everything that is bad for you and low in everything that's good for you. So they're low in nutritional value. So they don't have, all the vitamins and minerals that your body actually needs to survive and have longevity and live the best life that you possibly can live and boost your immune system and all these great things that vitamin and minerals do. Like that is lacking in fake foods. And so that's why we see, high rates of obesity, and high rates of, vitamin deficiencies, in Americans because of our diet, of, fake foods. And so we'll get into, kind of the list I mentioned earlier of the things. So like sugar. So sugar is something that is super dense, in a lot of processed foods. And so whenever you think about sugar, a lot of times, especially for me, like you can immediately think like Oreos. So I think like, Oreos, cookies, candy bars, and all these things. And like I equate, or I think sugar are those things, but it's not just that, because sugar is a carb. And so whenever you think about sugar, also think about the Cheez-Its that I mentioned earlier, chips and other things like that that are high in carbs. The reason is that whenever we consume carbohydrates, whether that be starches, or sugars, it is all processed as glucose in our body. It doesn't matter where you're getting your carb source from, it's all processed as glucose. And so glucose is used as an energy source for our bodies and for the cells in our bodies. And so, we'll talk about like working out and physical activity, but even if you were to do nothing the entire day, your cells still need energy for your body to function, to breathe, your brain to think, for you to walk, and all these other things. And so what happens is when we consume glucose, it's released into the bloodstream, and then the pancreas immediately releases insulin. And insulin is a hormone that signals those cells to say, "Hey, the glucose is ready for you to consume for your energy." And whatever is left over is either stored as glycogen, which is an immediate source, so it's ready available. So say if you're like sitting in the house and you're just chilling and you need to run outside really quick, you just take off running, like there's energy stores readily available in your muscles by way of glycogen, and your liver too as well by way of glycogen, that are readily available. But whatever is left is stored as fat. And so whenever you overconsume in carbohydrates and sugar, and especially if you're not physically active, you're going to have a lot of storage of that sugar be stored as fat. And so people a lot of times think, okay, fat makes you fat. Like a lot of what makes us fat or obese comes from carbs and sugar, and that's why carbs have gotten such a bad rap over the past 2 to 3 years. You also have things like insulin resistance. And so what happens with insulin resistance is that your cells, because you're consuming so much sugar, no longer react to the insulin that is signaling it to consume the glucose that is in is in your bloodstream until you have a buildup of glucose in your bloodstream. And then we know what that leads to: type 2 diabetes. And so that's why sugar is extremely bad for us. But all sugar is not created equal. And so whenever you think about sugar, or trying to satisfy that sweet tooth, think about fruits instead of highly processed or fake foods that have no nutritional value. Because whenever you eat fruits or things that are high in sugar, that are natural, they have nutritional value and they have fiber. And so one of the biggest things with fiber, whenever you talk about sugar, is that it slows the digestion process down. And fiber is actually a carb too as well. We don't actually legitimately digest it. It just kind of flows through our systems and exits our body. But the main thing about fiber and sugar is it doesn't spike your blood sugar levels immediately. And so whenever you eat things that are high in processed sugar, that sugar immediately gets released into the bloodstream, and that promotes fat storage. And so think of it like 5 o'clock traffic on a Friday evening. Everybody's trying to get home. Think about that whenever you eat processed sugars. It's all of it's immediately released into your bloodstream, and so you have a backup of glucose. And it basically, your body's like, okay, we're having a backup, we need to start storing this. And so that's when you can have fat storage, whenever you have a lack of fiber when consuming like sugars. And so that's the main thing with sugars. It is the main source of obesity, main source of insulin resistance, main source of type 2 diabetes.
I have a
Yeah,
quick question.
yeah.
So
Sorry, I'm trying to go as quick as I can because I
you're
know
on it.
we have
I love
60
it.
minutes. So I'm like, yo, let's get after it.
You're, I love it. So I have a quick question, comment. So what you're saying in terms of, and just for my own clarity as well as everyone watching, in terms of this like excess, right? Since like we don't have the fiber to process this like carb that's coming in. And I love what you said about like rush hour traffic, because I think about like rush hour traffic on like a Friday, and like you said, like I just want to get home and I'm like like I'm kind of panicked and like stressed, right? Is that the same kind of thing that's happening in our bodies in terms of what's, going on whenever we like give it this rush of sugar, like, and stress it out?
Yeah, same exact thing. And like just immediate, I thought like, think about, whenever you're in rush hour traffic, at that point, you're like, okay, I need to find a different route. Like I need to go somewhere else. And that's what glucose does. It's like, hey, we're backed up. I can't get to the cells that need me for energy. Where the heck am I going to go? And so they hit an exit ramp and it gets stored, as fat. And so, yeah, you're completely right on that. And our body freaks out too as well. And that's why we have insulin resistance, and things like pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes because of that. And so what's really important to understand is not just your overall sugar intake, but how much sugar are you eating in one sit-in. That
Mm,
is very important too as well, because if you're consistently having high carb, high sugary meals, then there's no doubt at some point you're going to have insulin resistance, you're going to have pre-diabetes, you're going to have type 2 diabetes. And so it's just being aware of those foods that you're eating, and also making sure that you know you're not just stuffing yourself with sugar, even if it's one time a day.
yeah, that makes sense. I like what you said about like your body's looking for an exit route. Like you're going off-roading without four-wheel drive.
Yeah,
Like I'm getting stuck in the ditch. And
exactly.
I know we're going to talk about this later in terms of what comes up whenever you are like talking about like those fake foods. However, spoiler alert, y'all, the food companies put sugar in literally everything. And it's
But
to get you addicted to it.
it is, and it's super strategic how sugar is addictive, but it's super strategic how they put it. You mentioning, how they put it in all the foods. It's in all processed foods.
Hmm.
The reason is because they know that it's addictive, and they know that, hey, if we can put something that isn't addictive to our food, the people are they're going to come back.
Hmm.
They're going to keep coming back. The other thing that's crazy, and I posted about this a few weeks ago, is that there's so many different names for sugar. It's like 30 to 40 different names. And so you could very well look at the ingredients list on the back of a box of cereal, and it says a name that is not sugar, but it's sugar. And
Right.
they're intentionally trying to be deceptive to get you to buy, that item. And because now that, the jig is up, like we know that sugar's bad. Now they're like, okay, we've got to find ways to hide it, because previously that wasn't the case.
Right.
Before, fat was the culprit. Like that was the culprit. So they didn't have to really do too much hiding. Like now they're having to hide.
And I think and like I said, we'll talk about that a bit more. We'll talk about food scientists when we get we're a few slides in, so we're giving you like a little teaser to this. But yeah, and I think that that's important to note when it comes to that type of marketing. They're playing on your like biology. They're playing on
Mhm.
like your psychology and like your mental like state, and like they know what is going to like keep you coming back for more. They know that like these certain colors are going to trigger you because like you're looking at the box, you're eating the food, then you see
Mhm.
that box again and you're like, oh yeah, that made me feel yummy, because like there's a
Exactly.
chemical that's released in your brain that makes you feel good when you eat the food, because they have the proper like nutrients, and not nutrients, excuse me, they have the proper ingredients. And so,
Exactly.
yeah, it's a thing where if I'm used to like jacking my system up, like stressing it out whenever I'm like eating all these foods, this is
Mhm.
something that Josh, you pointed out the other day. Then what happens when you eat a blueberry?
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing. And so, like, I'm not. I had a sweet tooth like growing up, but like now, like even when I eat like a cake or something, like I like whipped icing. Like I don't like super sweet stuff, and so I don't have like a super sweet tooth. But like when I pretty much eliminated like a year ago, I still have slip ups. So I'm like, oh man, I really want a pack of Oreos, and that's fine. That's okay. But um I like when I eliminated processed sugars or artificial sugars out of my diet, I'd say like 3 weeks after I ate a frozen blueberry, and I was just like, wow, it was like eating a blueberry for the first time. And it's because of the processed sugar that I was eating, it hijacked my taste buds. Like it just took over my taste buds. And so my encouragement to people that may have an issue with like sweets, or they have like a sweet tooth, like I suggest, and we'll talk about this later too as well, but like kind of wean yourself off, like slowly but surely start cutting back your artificial sugar intake. And as you do that, have like a week where you don't eat any artificial or added sugar from processed foods, and just eat a fruit, like eat a blackberry, blueberry, and I promise you, it's gonna taste just like candy. Like I love frozen blueberries; they taste just like candy to me.
Yeah, I love blackberries and grapes, frozen grapes. Those are really good too.
Frozen grapes, they're awesome
Well,
too.
that's a
Well,
little tip. All right, are we ready to talk about omega sixes?
yeah, and so omega 6 is a fatty acid. And so in recent years, probably in the past 5 to 10 years, they've done a lot of studies that found that omega 6 is inflammatory. And so some people are like, okay, what does that actually mean? And I had someone like, we talk about like inflammation, and that's a buzzword in like the nutrition and the fitness community, like inflammation. Like, but what does that mean to the average person? So inflammation is the body's repair system, if I can put it as simple as I can put it. And so we think of inflammation externally more than we think about it internally. And so, perfect example, I hurt my knee what, a week and a half ago, and I'm stubborn, so I just kept training on it. But I developed a Baker's cyst behind my knee, and the front of my knee, where the tendons and other things are at, has become inflamed. And so when we think about like injuries, like elbow injury or an ankle sprain or knee injury, we think, okay, inflammation, it swells up, and that is the white blood cells go into that area, trying to heal it. The same thing happens on the inside of our body too as well, whenever we consume toxins and pathogens that come from these processed foods, and come from things like smoking cigarettes or things of that nature. And so the same way that we can have inflammation from an injury on the outside of the body, the same way that we can have it to the tissue on the inside of our body, and it's even more deadly. And so we can think about like acute injury, something that happens at the unexpectedly like twisting your ankle, whatever, it flames up. You do the necessary things that you need to do for it to go down, and you can get back to your regular life. That happens in the inside of the body too, as well, whenever we talk about toxins or pathogens. But if you're consistently consuming processed foods, if you're consistently consuming processed sugars, if you're consistently consuming processed carbs and processed fats, you're going to have these toxins inside of your body, and they are going to cause inflammation, and it's going to be more deadly than an ankle sprain. It's going to be more deadly than you hurting your knee. We're talking about inflammation to tissues, to arteries, and all these other things that can cause you know death. Like literally can cause death. And so I think it's important to talk about omega 6s and inflammation, and help people understand the same way that we can physically see the inflammation on the outside of our body. The same thing can happen on the inside of our body. And so one of those omega 6s, which is RAR, is found in processed foods. It's found in vegetable oils, and the things that are packaged in box in the middle of the grocery store. And we found that that is like an inflammatory component, to the point that the anti-inflammatory drugs that we use, like ibuprofen, blocks RAR. Like that is proof that, like, hey, omega 6s are inflammatory, and inflammation is the source of arthritis, heart disease, and other chronic diseases. And processed trans fat too as well. So I won't talk too long about trans fat, because trans fat was banned in 2018. But there's still trans fat in some foods, and it's one of those things where, like, you can put a ban on something, but if it's already been produced and it's out there, it kind of takes the time for it to trickle out. So that's kind of what we're doing now too. But I think the biggest thing with trans fat is for the people that have consumed it over an extended period of time. There has been damage done. It's not irreversible, but there has been damage that has been done. And so just taking the necessary precautions, and knowing that trans fat is like the one of the worst things that you can consume, and know, okay, like, hey, have I been consuming this, and taking the necessary steps to reverse the damage that trans fat may have done, if it is something that you have consumed consistently in the past, because it causes heart disease. It increases your bad cholesterol, which is LDL, which is the a low density lipoprotein, which, whenever you say low density, we're talking about these small particles that can basically burrow in your arteries, and that's how we get strokes and heart attacks and things of that nature. And so, one of the biggest studies over the past 5 years, and I think that's going to be upcoming, is cholesterol. So your low density, the bad, high density, which is the good, and what actually entails increases in cholesterol, because it's not necessarily food. So, sorry, I'm go back to my notes real quick.
No,
Oh, yeah. So, as we mentioned earlier, fat isn't the problem. It's the fats from processed foods, the sunflower oils, the vegetable oils, things of that nature. Those are the fats that are bad. Natural fats are good for us. And so we think about fats that are found in natural products, like cold pressed or extra virgin olive oil, because it's cold pressed, or animal fats too as well, grass fed butter. These are all natural fats that we find in the environment that we want to be consuming, and not the heavily processed fats that are found in processed foods. And so you can think, like, how did we get this wrong? Like that's the biggest question. That's one of the questions that like always ask myself about some of these things, is like, how did we get this wrong? And so one of the guys that was like the catalyst of demonizing fat was this guy named Ansel Keys, who was a physiologist, who basically deemed all fat bad from a study he did that was inaccurate, because he this is someone that isn't a expert or a professional at fat. Like, this is not a leading professional in fat. And so when he did this study, he didn't even have the knowledge to know that when he was using margarine, that it wasn't butter, that they're not the same thing. And so the things that he found from that study, he used as facts, which, come to find out, they weren't even facts because it was margarine. And margarine is made from cotton seeds. It's heavily processed. Um, one of the last fats you should be consuming, and it's totally different from butter. Like margarine is not butter. They're two totally different things. They affect the body in different ways. And so that mess up was huge on his part, and probably not probably it did cost people their lives. And that is the extreme sad fact of misinformation, especially when it comes to fat too as well. And so, because of his advocacy to deem fat bad, he got a lot of companies that like stood behind him. We're talking about like big companies like Coca-Cola, that are processed high sugar foods, because they're like, hey, if he's demonizing fat, then we're good. And so they kind of pushed him to the front, gave him a platform to speak from, even when the people that were professionals were saying like, hey, we think he's wrong. They still gave him the platform. And so luckily, we did get a correction from a basically a professional, a lipid scientist, like the goat of fat. Like this guy spent his entire life learning about fat, and he basically proved Ansel wrong that processed foods and vegetable oils were the source of chronic disease, and it wasn't necessarily fat in general, and the natural animal fats that we find. And so, I say all that to say, and I wanted to like bring names up and kind of like be a little bit specific about that, so that people understand that don't automatically trust entities and people with your health. Even if you think like, you would think, okay, like this guy seems like a professional, like he was on the front of Time magazine, like the dude was on the front of Time magazine. But to know like, hey, even a guy like that can get it wrong, to just not trust everything you see. And if it's like, if that guy can get it wrong, like maybe I shouldn't be trusting these food companies. Maybe I shouldn't trust the label. If the professionals are getting it wrong, like who knows what the food companies are telling us. And so I think one of the big things too is just not to trust everything that you see. Don't trust food companies because they're not on your side. They want to make money at your expense. They want to make money at the expense of your health. We want, and me and you have talked about this, and it's just the world what we're in now. We want convenience, we want cheap, we want it fast. And so when we go to the grocery store, it is easy for us, and I don't blame anybody for this. That's the point of having this conversation and talking about these things, so that way you can be aware of it. But when we go to the grocery store, we kind of have like this get out, get in, get out mentality. Let me go in here, get what I need, and go. And so a lot of times that means like looking at the front of a label, and it may say high protein, low fat, low carb. Cool, let's get that. That's healthy for me. Oh, low carb, bam, let's get that. Low fat, bam. High protein, bam, let's get that. And so you start making decisions based on the labels that these food companies are intentionally using to pull you in and buy the product that is misleading. And so you can look at some of these labels that say high protein, and you turn, like I've done it so many times, where you turn it over and it says 10 grams of protein. Me and you know that 10 grams of protein isn't high protein. Like that's
Mm-mm.
not a lot of protein.
Yeah, what's a
And
good ratio, really quick, just for everyone? Like, how much protein should we be eating a day?
um, so about zero point 0.8 to a complete 1% of your body weight. So I weigh about 185, 190. So I eat about 185 grams of protein a day.
And
That's
you
what
also
most
work out a lot.
say that again.
And you also work out a lot.
Yeah, I also work out a lot, which tears your muscles. The protein is what builds your muscles back up and repairs it. So, for the average person, anywhere between 0.5 to 1% of your body weight is a good number to kind of reach for. And as I get older, I know that it's harder for me to keep muscle mass. It's harder for me to put on muscle mass. So I eat more protein. I do things that are necessary to make sure that I keep my muscle mass, because it is important as I get older, as my bones get a little bit more fragile, all these other things. I want to make sure that, I have a strong muscle skeletal frame on me. So yeah.
Building that good foundation. Yeah, thank you for that. I
Yeah.
just wanted to again, like we're sliding in these little tidbits of knowledge because yeah, talking about like the marketing and how they're like low carb, like high protein, exactly what Josh said. Like we recognize, like we've been in this like game long enough to know that yeah, 10 grams of protein, if he needs 185 a day, and I work out pretty frequently too, and so I need
Mhm,
about like 140 a day is what I
mhm,
found works for me, and it's all trial and error. Like I
mhm,
didn't just like find some magic formula one day. Like you kind of have to
mhm.
like see what works for you
Yeah.
based on your lifestyle. And yeah, like I do work better with a high protein diet, and so yeah, if I see 10 grams of protein per serving, because that's another thing too. A lot of times we're like high protein, and then you
Mhm.
like look at what that actually means, and it will be for like 2 servings or like for the box, and you're like,
Right.
well, that's like a lot of calories, not a lot of protein. And for
Exactly.
me, or whenever you're aware of how much protein you need, because like Josh so
Mhm,
beautifully said, like this isn't to shame anyone by any means, because you don't know
mhm.
what you don't know.
Yeah.
That's why we're talking. And
Mhm.
yeah, if I see something, that's all to just say, that's like 10 grams of protein, I'm like, "Pfft, what is that going to do?" Like,
Yeah. But it's not just macronutrients too as well. Like
right.
whenever like I think I may have mentioned this a few weeks ago. I don't know for sure, but like even bread, like you look at bread, you go down the bread aisle, and you look at these packages and they say, whole grain, or all these other different names, 10 grains or whatever. But like, what does that actually mean? And once you find out, like, hey, that doesn't mean that it's 100% made of grains. Like the minimal requirements for these food companies are shit. Like they're nothing, like literally. And people think that like these food companies are vetted. They think these ingredients are vetted. And so like think of GMO. Like how did that fall through the cracks? It's super easy. Like these ingredients are not being vetted. So what ends up happening, these companies are allowed to put these things in food, and then 5 years down the line, oh, it's killing people. This isn't good. This isn't good. Like this shouldn't be an ingredient in food. And then it gets banned, like trans fat. we're
Mhm.
guinea like we're like we are currently guinea pigs for the food industry. And so we're learning things through trial and error about food, and we are the test subjects. Everything that we have currently learned, like the knowledge that we have right now, we got from the previous generation. The next generation is going to get the food knowledge that we gain in in our time and in our generation. And so I think the biggest thing is that people trust the food companies so much, they think that like the government has their hand in it, to the extent that it's safe. These ingredients are safe, but they're not. And that's why we continually have bans on these ingredients, because there isn't proper vetting of the ingredients. And we can get into like, the government and their relationship with food companies. But I think the important thing right now is to understand that, for individuals to understand the food company's not on your side. These ingredients aren't getting vetted like you think they're getting vetted, and that you are a guinea pig. And so it's about taking what we have learned from previous generations and applying that to our life. And so that means like, hey, one thing that we know for sure, like one, and I'm not going to say 100% sure that, but one thing that we know is that whole foods are vital to your health, because they have the vitamins and they have the minerals that our body wants and is craving. And so um, do not trust food companies. Do not trust food companies at all. Don't trust headline statements, because we see them all the time, whether it be on the news, in a newspaper, in a magazine, on Instagram, on Facebook. Like, and I'm even saying that to myself. Like, if you see something I post, or you see something like that I put up, and you're like, I don't know, or like, don't automatically trust. Like, do your research. Like, ask somebody else. Like, ask your doc. Like, start vetting the information that you get. Like, if they're not gonna do the vetting, like, you vet the information. And so like, don't automatically trust headlines. um the, I'm not going to say this is the wrong thing to say. I'm not going to say don't trust your trust your doctor. One thing that I do want people to understand is that doctors aren't trained in nutrition. They are taught to diagnose, they're taught to treat with pharmaceutical drugs. That is what they're taught through medical school. And so what we find is like a lot of people put all this trust in doctors that may not have the necessary training in nutrition or necessary knowledge to really help them when it comes to food and their overall health. And so, with that being said, always ask questions to your doctor. Your doctor knows your medical history, like that. That he or she is one of the most important people when it comes to your health. But just understand that they may not have the nutrition knowledge that you think they may have. And so always ask questions. Don't accept the pill without seeing if there's a lifestyle change that you can make, because it's so easy for us to like go to the doctor. Oh, you've got high cholesterol, high blood pressure. And I'm not saying don't heed your doctor's advice, but always ask questions. Always get a second opinion. Like, hey, is there a lifestyle change that I can make that can eliminate me from taking these pharmaceutical drugs, which we can get into, that make a shit ton of money, not only for doctors, pharmaceutical companies, the government, the whole nine. That may be something for another day. With that being said, don't trust the government. We think about not trusting the government in a political way, but I'm saying don't trust the government in a food way as well, because we have these dietary guidelines that we think is the golden rule. Like, hey, the government released the food pyramid or the dietary guidelines. Like, that's what we need to follow. But we found in the past that they got it wrong too. Like, the government has gotten it wrong. And when you look at the committee of the people that are creating the dietary guidelines, there are so many discrepancies with the people that are part of those committees that are creating the dietary guidelines. And I kind of want to tread lightly, because like I've done the research on our committee. Like, I've done the research on those people. Like, I've seen the names, I've seen the other companies that they work for. And you can say, like, I'll use Jamie Ard, for example, who is actually a graduate of Wake Forest in our city, or my city of Winston-Salem. Like, he is on the committee for the dietary guidelines of the government. He's one of the ones that helped create the new dietary guidelines for 2020 through 2025. But if you look, he's worked for Nestle. He's received $500,000 from food companies like Nestle. There's so many other people that are on these committees, that when you look at the other companies that they work with, it's like maybe they're not, maybe it's nothing sketchy going on. Like, that may very well be the case. But at the same time, as a government that holds itself to a higher standard, you shouldn't allow someone that is on your committee to be working for Nestle. You shouldn't allow, there's another person working on the committee that works for Coca-Cola, that's an executive Coca-Cola, works with these companies. And so when you look at these people, you kind of second guess, like, can we trust the information that we're getting from these people if they're working for these companies that are giving them millions of dollars for studies or other work? And so
conflicts of interests.
Yeah, definitely conflicts of interest. And once you kind of see that and you kind of learn, you take a step back and you think, you're like, man, this entire time I've really been trusting other people to make my food decisions for me. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't on purpose, because you thought they meant the best for you, but they don't. That is the problem. They're in it to put money in their pocket. They're in it to get you addicted to their foods. They're in it to keep you coming back. And that's point blank period. There's no sugarcoating it. It is what it is. And it sucks, because we're living in a time with COVID-19 where people are dying, people are struggling, and you have the government and the people that are in leadership that are barely talking about the real change that needs to happen when it comes to conquering any virus that comes along, any pathogen that comes along. And that is your diet and your immune system, because all the vitamins and minerals that our body needs, that our immune system needs, comes from whole foods. We're not getting it. We're not getting it from processed foods. It's like, it's not coming from it. And they can try their best to artificially add those things to the food. They can put a, vitamin E or whatever, but it's nowhere near comparable to the nutritional density that you get from whole foods. And so, I think about even, and this is kind of going a little bit off subject, but I think about even for myself, who I've been more strict on my whole foods diet for the past year. So like, it's been a year and I've been super strict. And like, I usually get sick every year. I've not been sick this entire year. I've not been sick at all. I felt great. I felt amazing. I don't, every now and again, I'll slip up and I'll eat some processed foods. I had fast food a couple times this year, but other than that, like, I've felt the best that I've ever felt. And I'm the oldest I've ever been, obviously, because, but I
I
say
can
all that to
attest to
say,
that.
yeah, well, I say all that to say that even previously being someone who is in shape, like, I started boxing when I was 12 years old. I've always been a part of sports, like quit boxing to play football. Like, I've always been healthy. I've always been, conscious about what I eat. But when I'm doing it from a standpoint of, hey, I still want to eat the foods that I want to eat, or the foods that I think I want to eat and look good, I still end up buying things that, like protein bars that may be high in protein, but still have other discrepancies with them when it comes to the ingredients that are in them. And so it has been tough to be like, okay, like, I need to cut these protein bars out. I need to cut this stuff out. And so this relates not only to people that may not even be in the fitness world, but people that are in the fitness world too as well, because I see it. I've done it where I've looked down at my cart and yeah, I have a six pack. Yeah, I'm in shape, but like, everything in my cart is processed. And how do I actually really feel on the inside? How healthy am I actually? And so that is extremely, extremely important too as well.
Woo, Josh, you just had like so much, like a wealth of knowledge. Like,
Sorry, I'm just like talking
no, it
real.
was good. You were on a roll. Like, GMOs, just for anyone who doesn't know, that is an acronym for genetically modified organisms. And so what that means is, they take our foods and, you know, for reasons like, and this is something that I thought about as well, like, we're so far removed, as Josh mentioned, like, today it's all about convenience, like what's quick, what's fast, what's easy. And we don't look at food the same way we did whenever we are or were, experiencing it from like a tribal, like we're all connected kind of like level, in terms
Mhm.
of like how we would have like a ceremony to like hunt for the food, how we would have a ceremony to like prepare it, how it was really an experience. Now it's very much just something that we look at as like, oh shit, like we've got to eat kind of thing.
Well,
And
yeah. Sorry, not. I didn't mean
no,
to
go
cut you
ahead.
off. No, I was just gonna say that like, you mentioning that reminds me of like things that I've read, or just how the culture of food has changed immensely, over the past 100 to 150 years, whatever. But yeah, I can't remember what book it was I was reading, but basically what they were talking about was how Native Americans would trade food secrets with other people, and like, they held that like to a high standard, like their nutrition knowledge, and how certain foods would heal certain diseases, or help them out in certain areas when it came to their health. And so, there were, and I wish I'm like always reading shit. So like, I read and like, I think I retain it well, but then like, I'm like, oh, I don't think I retain that well at all. But I wish I wrote the notes down for that excerpt that I read, because it was a certain disease that like, you know, someone had asked for from a Native American, and like, it was considered currency. And the guy was like, no, I'm not going to give it to you for whatever said reason. But they considered nutrition knowledge as currency. And that's how important it was. And just you mentioning that shows how much that has changed over the past 100 to 150 years.
Yeah. That's a really cool point. Like, I didn't know that. I did know, like I said, like the ceremony into like that went into it, because I used to
Mhm.
study Native American culture like pretty extensively whenever I was
Mhm.
younger, and the different tribes and things like that. And so
Mhm.
they, exactly like what you said, they had a cure for everything until like
Mhm.
Europeans came and brought with them all these foreign diseases
Mhm.
and wiped out the population.
Yeah.
So like that's another conversation. But yeah, like regarding nutrition, yeah, it is this thing, and it's something that's very sacred in a sense that this is literally what we're doing to fuel these vessels that we're in while we're here. To take it on like a spiritual, like kind of
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
observation.
But but that's important that you say that, because we invest so much time, so much energy, so much money and all these other things, but we're not willing to do it for our bodies. And I just like, I get it. Like, I understand, like, there's so much misinformation out there. Like, foods are addictive. Like, there's all these other, outside things that can sway us. But like, the most important thing in life is your health and your body. If you're not able to maximize that, then you're not going to have the highest quality of life that you could possibly have. You're not going to have longevity, all these other things. And so, I think that just taking a step back and asking yourself, like, hey, am I making my health a priority? And asking yourself, do I think my health is important? And some people may say, and this is their opinion, they may say, like, my health is important, but I'd rather eat these foods and die young. And if that's you, fine. I get it. Like, that's on you. Like, I can't, like, if that is your decision, that is your decision. But like I mentioned earlier, I think there's so many people that if they had the right information, if they had the help, if they knew these things, that, they would at least try to build a better foundation to their health with it when it comes to food.
Yeah. And I think that you're exactly right. Like we're focused on the exterior in terms of how do I look, like the six pack, like I mentioned earlier, like what do I wear, like,
Mhm.
Botox, like nails, like for guys like style, like, for women style too, like it's just all these different external things when, yeah, like we perceive the internal to be something that like we can't see it. So like out of sight, out of mind kind of mentality. And this is what I work with a lot of my clients,
Mhm.
with my clients. It's, yeah, like it's not the things on the outside, it's like what you're doing on the inside, and that is in terms of like, mental, emotional, and also like the foods that like, we are talking about today fuel your body. And one thing that I mentioned, because whenever I said I can attest to like what you were saying about not being sick when you start eating healthier foods, when I
Mhm.
started learning about these different foods and what goes into them, it wasn't because I was like, let me be healthy. It was because I wanted the six pack. I started working out because I didn't play sports as a like younger.
Yeah.
I didn't get into fitness until I was probably like mid 20s. And
Mhm.
so mid to late 20s, I would say.
Mhm.
And in those terms, like it was in a situation where I then became aware, like, oh, like I can't eat a salad and perform in the gym. Like I need more fuel for my body because it's not going to do what I'm capable of doing because I'm not giving it the foods that it needs in order to perform at like optimum level. And so
Yeah.
that's when I started getting curious and learning more about these different foods. And like you mentioned about fats, I remember one time I asked my mom for this ingredient, like, or what the recipe was for like this the biscuits that she used to make. And
Mhm.
I read the ingredients, and to your point, I'm like, what is this? Like, what
Yeah.
is Crisco? Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I know it's supposed to be fat, but like there's a million ingredients in it. Like, what is that? And so when you look at it in terms of that, and there was a book that really was pretty impactful. It's called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration by Weston A. Price. And he went around to these different cultures, and I think Josh that we've spoken about it. He went around to these different cultures and went into the um, the food and diet that they were eating because he wanted to find a vegetarian, like plant-based society, and he couldn't. The only
Mhm.
reason that these vegetarian, like plant-based societies existed were for religious beliefs and practices or scarcity, availability
Mhm.
of like animal products. But all that's to say that he went to like Alaska to like Argentina, like he went to all these different like places around the world to find these tribes that were untouched by society. And what he found was that within a um, one generation, um, the the generations and people would like experience like teeth like overcrowding because of the malnutrition, because of the sugar. that people were bringing in. And
Mhm.
yeah, that's just to go back and say, we're approaching 60 minutes and there's still like a couple things that we want to get in.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I was gonna say something about a study, but I'm gonna skip that. I'll
no,
say
go ahead and say it because we said we
no.
wanted for 90 minutes. So like we've
Yeah,
got
I
time.
won't. I won't because it'll take me a second to find it.
Well, I've got some things to say. I'm going to talk a bit more about what we were
Okay,
saying
go ahead.
here in
Okay.
terms of the food companies. And we mentioned this earlier and said we would come back to it. And so that is what Josh was talking about in terms of like food scientists. And those are the ones that are literally paid to find the exact combination and ratio of ingredients that go into foods to keep you not quite satisfied and coming back for more. And so the same people that are making these foods are the same ones that are um, creating the cures, right? And so with that, it's very much one of those like, okay, well, that's going to raise my eyebrow because if you are making this food for me, but you also make this pill or this cure that I'm getting from this food, then like that's a little suspicious. Like what?
Mhm.
And in terms of doctors, like yeah, like trust your doctor, and at the same time know that they have their own agendas. They want to put like food on their family's table, and so it might be easier for them to prescribe like this band-aid cure, like this fix, instead of really getting curious about like, okay, well, why don't you tell me about like your day-to-day life? And a lot of times I think people aren't honest in terms of like, well, this is really what I'm doing. And that's not because they're trying to be dishonest. I think a lot of
Mhm.
times it's just that we aren't, like Josh said, we don't know that these are things that we should be concerned about. Whenever we go to our educational systems, we're not taught to, um, question, right? We go to these schools and we are very much taught to take the authority as like, the gospel, if
Mhm.
you will. Like we're taught very much to like, this is what it is. This is what's in the textbook, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
That's why now, like, in the age of like social media, we're having all these like realizations about like, oh shit, well, the people that, wrote the textbooks are the ones that, had the power. They're the ones that, um, wouldn't allow certain races to learn how to read. Like these are the ones that like wouldn't allow certain races to learn how to write. And so it's very much like the history that they wanted you to know about that has
Exactly.
been created for us.
Exactly.
And that's a whole nother story.
It,
But
it
go ahead.
Yeah, let's I didn't find it, but basically what it was a dentist. I think it was in like the 1920s, 1930s, and I'll find it. His last name's Price from what I
That's
remember.
him. That's nutrition and physical degeneration. That's Weston A. Price.
Yeah. Cool. Is that the same person you're talking about?
Yep.
Okay. Cool. Awesome. Yeah. Well, then you said it then.
Well,
But no, it was just basically him that when he was traveling and studying these different tribes and like their dental work or whatever, and in relation to their diets. And so same exact thing you said. So, and that's what made me think of it when you said that.
yeah.
But with what you just said, I think we can transition to the next slide.
All
Are you
right.
there?
Yeah, we got off topic, but
Oh, no, we're it's good. I already with me, I know we'll get off topic. Um, but so we think about, especially when it comes to nutrition, with me being black, like I have a special part of what I am doing for the black community, because whenever you look at some of these statistics, you're like why are black people or African Americans at the higher percentile of all of these statistics? Like, and I wanted to show this one just because it's relevant to what's going on today. And it's like, hey, African Americans are 3 times more likely to die of COVID-19. 3 times more likely than a white person to die of COVID-19. And like, I don't know if that shocks you, but that shocks me. And like, that's from the CDC. Like, you can go on their website and get this information from a study they did. And it's like 3 times more likely. And you ask yourself why, like how is this happening? And you think of other statistics like black people are 40% 40% of black people have hypertension, while 20% of white people have it. Obesity is 10 to 20% higher among minorities. Black people are leading in chronic disease over white people. And so you look at these statistics and you're like, okay, what, like, how is this happening? Where did this come from? And what I'm getting ready to say is not factually proven. And I guess we can have a conversation about it. If anyone has a comment that they want to make, we can make the comment. But I think it comes down to food insecurity and the foundation of food education. And so we can date this all the way back to, slavery, and the diet of slaves, and even the diet of, Black people post slavery. They were not given nutritional foods. Like, they were given, the scraps, the, stuff that, the white people didn't want to eat, or that had no nutritional value. And so when you start off with a bad foundation, and that is what you're going off of, like, it's just going to keep repeating throughout the years. And so I think that comes from the insecurity of food for African Americans, and just just a very long history of poor food education. And so I think the solution to these issues of seeing this stat of 3 times, more Black people dying from COVID, 40% more Black people with hypertension, or, or Black people being the leaders in chronic disease. Like, me as a Black person and someone who has this knowledge and is passionate about it, I can't just like sit back and not say anything. And so I think that the important thing is to help minorities build a better foundation of food education and food knowledge. Like, we need more Black people that are advocating for better nutrition. We need more Black people teaching other Black people about food, and how to build healthy habits. And so, I just wanted to share like some of those statistics because it's super important. And I think that, to some degree, anyone that is in this field should know things like this, and be intentional about helping minorities when it comes to building a food knowledge, of food foundation.
Yeah. Thank you
So,
for sharing that.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, this is, you mentioned like you don't know if it shocks anyone. If it doesn't, I mean, I think I don't usually like to say should and shouldn't, but like it should, like
yeah. No,
to
I
think
mean,
like that's crazy.
yeah, yeah.
Like
When
the
you talk,
fact that we can even like figure out like that demographic
yeah, but it's like you're like, how are they through? Because Black people, are more we have more preconditioned pre I
existing,
can't even say it. I can't even say
pre-existing conditions,
I can't. I'll let you say. I don't even know why.
more pre-existing conditions.
Conditions than white people. We can also talk about, health insurance and all those other things, but we won't go into detail. But there are reasons why Black people are at the top of these statistics, and I think, it just takes individuals like us to bring this up and do our best to try to help people, and not just sit back, but maybe come up with some solutions and ways that we can change the number that we see on the screen
Yeah.
right now. So,
All right. Thank you for that. And yeah,
yeah, of course.
I do think it's important. I think that, I mean, if everyone like shares, if everyone watching shares the stat with like one person and encourages them to do the same, that's like how we start to create like this awareness. And
Yeah,
like you said, like it's kind of like, well, how? Like, how is that possible? Like, where is that coming from? And
yeah,
so we start to create that like curiosity. And so people will start to hopefully, dig a little deeper and like look more into this because, you mentioned like, yeah, it's one thing for me to like read something and like take that knowledge at face value. But I love what you said about like even things that you post or like, even things that I post, like do your own research because it's important that you have your own perspective and your own explanation as to why. And so if reading this is, something that is unknown or news to you, then share it with someone and take some time to do a quick Google search, probably on the device that you're watching us on right now, to educate yourself and get curious about, well, how is this possible? Why is this happening? And what can I do about it to, like you said, like decrease that number?
yeah. And it's tough. It's really tough because I would say, you know, gravitate towards, people that are professionals in their field whenever you're, seeking out extra information, or, vetting information that you have. But that's also tough too as well. Don't believe headlines. Like, I'm more of a, studies type of person. But even still, studies can be misleading because, there have been studies that, I've looked at, and then I've, look at the people that did the study. I'm like, oh, this guy works for this company.
Hmm.
And it has been proven of studies that have been paid for by companies like Coca-Cola to favor Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
And so it's really tough. And I think that's why it's important, especially whenever you're trying to build a foundation of food knowledge, is to seek help, from other people, so that actually, kind of know these things.
Yeah, and I think this is a good segue. We didn't plan it like this, but um,
Yeah.
one thing to mention just before we do go to the next slide and talk about some, ways to kind of like mitigate all of, like the processed food and like the overwhelm of like
Mhm.
information is to your point about studies being able to be skewed. You can get a study to say pretty much whatever you want. It
Whatever you
depends
want.
on the control group. It depends on like your variables. I know I've read several studies where it's like, oh, this, percentage of women are more likely to, experience like addiction or whatever. But then you look at the demographics for the control group or the study group,
Mhm.
and it's like low income, like, very much people who are already kind of primed to have
Mhm.
addiction. I'm just using
Mhm.
addiction as an example.
Yeah.
Like, you're not getting a collection like a universe, or excuse me, you're not getting like a very diverse sample, right? Like you're not
Mhm.
getting people who are like an equal number from like, high income like suburban like city dwellers and like,
Mhm.
low income like rural dwellers. Like you're very much taking like a control group, a population from like the group that's primed to already do the thing that you want to prove the study to like say
Exactly.
is true. And
Exactly.
so in those terms, like, yeah, it's very much like you can read a study and be like, oh wow, and it can be a fact, but you have
Mhm.
to have the knowledge and the foresight to kind of, like Josh is saying, like get curious and be like, okay, well, let me dig a little deeper on this. Like, what was that like study
Mhm.
looking like? Like what were the parameters, if
Yeah.
you will?
And it's tough because you think about, someone like Ansel Keys, who led, you know the demonization of, all fats. And it's like, dude ended up on the cover of Time magazine. Like, he was, pushed to the front and given a voice. And even after his colleagues and, fat lipid professionals in the science world, proved him wrong, like, he wasn't held accountable, but like, people died from the information that he put out there. And that is just the really sad part about it all, is that there's so many there's so much misinformation out there that has cost people their lives.
Yeah.
And like, if and it I guess that's another motivating factor for me, is to like know these things, and like, just to sit on my ass and not do anything about it, you know what I mean? So it's, that's just another tough thing. But I think that can kind of transition us to, I guess, steps in order to, kind of change things and move closer to health. And so one of those things is slowly introducing whole foods. I think, you know, with diet culture, which we mentioned earlier, I hate using that, but with diet culture, I think people have this idea of like, okay, we're going to start on Monday and we're going balls to the wall 100%. Like, that's not sustainable. Like, and a lot of people, I've done it. Like, okay, we're going to start Monday. I'm throwing everything away in the kitchen, and, I'm going to a grocery store, I'm getting all the things. Like, that is awesome. Like,
It's
like,
admirable.
admirable,
It's
kudos to
ambitious.
you. And hey, if it works, like, by all means do it. But I think what's going to be more sustainable, and more doable for the average person, is just slowly introduce whole foods into your diet, like, just one by one. And so that may mean, like, hey, maybe you don't eat vegetables like that. Like, hey, add a vegetable a day to one of your meals. Like, hey, maybe you don't cook at all right, start cooking actual food once a week. And then maybe in 2 weeks, up it to 2 times a week. It's the small changes that lead to lifestyle changes. And so, as you're slowly introducing whole foods to your diet, slowly eliminate processed food. So if you're eating out, if you're going to McDonald's, if you're eating out 2 to 3 times a week, just say, hey, I'm going to limit it to 1 time a week. Or if you're eating out every day, say, hey, I'm going to limit it to 4 times a week. Just take those small steps and keep adding on week by week. And I think that's what's going to get, a lot of people, to the point where they can see some real change in the food that they're eating. Start replacing added sugar with fruit, like I mentioned earlier. And once you do that, you like trust me, you'll notice it. Like if you cut added sugar out and you eat a frozen blueberry, you're gonna be like, wow. Like your taste buds are gonna be like, what is that? It tastes just like candy. But it also has nutritional value. It has fiber. It's going to keep you fuller longer because of the fiber. And so these are the things that we need to be eating when it comes to food. Um, Shopping you in a grocery store. And so I love that the things that provide us with the nutritional density that we need aren't really that hard to find. Like when you think about like other diets, like you think about keto and all these other things, like it can be complicated to some people because they're like, okay, like what can I eat? What can I eat? Like what about this? Like what about that? Like with a whole foods diet, if you get in your head one ingredient, like real food, shopping a U in a grocery store, these are all the things that are in a U whenever you walk in the grocery store: produce, meat, and dairy. And I don't eat dairy, but that's a conversation for another day. But like whenever you go in the grocery store, try to shop in a U and avoid the middle where you have all the package and process items. The cool thing about eating a fully whole foods diet is that you eat when you're hungry. Like I eat when I'm hungry. And the reason that is one, is that it's dense in fiber, which makes you feel fuller. And so whenever you're eating processed foods, things that are high in sugar, high in carbs, high in fat, things that are in boxes, it's meant for you to come back. Like you're going to be hungry within 30 to 45 minutes, within an hour, or you're going to binge on it. I've done it before. But because there's fiber in whole foods, you're going to be fuller longer. And also because there's nutritional value, and typically whole foods are not as dense in calories and in sugar as processed foods. You're able to eat more in a day. And so like even now, like I'm physically, like we were talking earlier about eating to look a certain way, like eating to look a certain way physically, like I am in the best shape when it comes to that. But that is not my purpose. And so that is a result of me eating like that. And I don't starve myself. Like I eat when I'm hungry. I eat a crap ton. Like I eat a lot of food, but it's mostly whole foods. I also say seek help, like we mentioned earlier. Invest in your health, like build a foundation. And so, if you're not willing to, do the work on your own, do the research, spend the time, which honestly it takes years and years to kind of figure out what works for you. Understanding your health and even getting more in depth with your health history with your doctor, like that is a lot. So I say seek help from a nutrition coach, or a nutritionist or a dietitian. Like these are people that can help you build the foundation of food health. And these are people that you don't necessarily have to have in your life forever. Like, even if it's for a short time to help you gain the knowledge that you need to build a foundation of a healthy lifestyle, invest in that, because it's going to improve your quality of life. It's going to improve your longevity of life. It's going to improve everything about your life. This is your body, your vessel. This is the only body I'm going to get. Like, this is it. And so why not invest in taking care of it and being, having the best version of my body that I can have, not from a looks perspective, but from a health perspective. So budget for your health. Like, I budget for my health. I'm by no means rolling in dough or anything, but I do buy organic. So what that means is that if there's something that I can't buy, like I'm going to take money away from somewhere else that I may not necessarily need it, to make sure that I'm getting the food that I know that is going to provide me with the nutritional value that I want, and it's not going to have the toxins that I don't want in it. And so if you can, it may not be in your power. It is what it is. I get it. People are in different circumstances, but if you can, like, don't always make that excuse. Like, oh, eating healthy is expensive. Like, I hear people say that, and I'm like, I'm at a bar having a drink with you. I like, don't come out and drink. Like, you know what I mean? Like, here's one thing that you can cut right here that may help you be able to, buy the food that, is better for you. So, do that. count calories. And I don't mean for the rest of your life. Some people would be like, what do you like count calories? They say count calories is bad. I don't think counting calories at some point in your life is important, because I think people um, don't truly know the portions that they're eating. And so whenever you're counting calories and you're being super attentive to what you're consuming, you get a better idea of portion sizes, and you're able to build a foundation of what you're actually eating. And so, count calories for like 6 months. Just do it for 6 months and track what you're eating. So that way you can know, like, hey, this is what 6 ounces of this looks like. This is what 4 ounces of this look like. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be worried about getting 6 ounces of chicken or 4 ounces of this or 5 ounces of this, but like it'll help you know, like, hey, if I ate 4 tablespoons of butter, like I know what that entails. Like I know what comes with that, and I'm willing to make that decision versus you just eating 4 tablespoons of butter and you don't know that you ate 4 tablespoons of not butter, but peanut butter. So um, I think counting calories and tracking your food is extremely important to help build a foundation. I don't suggest doing it for the rest of your life. Like I don't do it. Like when I eat throughout a day, I can automatically estimate what's in the food I'm eating. Like I can say, oh, there's, you know, 20 grams of protein in this. There's 30 grams of carbs. This is high in, vitamin C and vitamin A. Like these are the things that I need right now. I have an idea of that because I've spent time tracking it.
Which I think is a good point to note because yeah, people are like looking at this as like, oh, well, this is really difficult. Like, how much to do that? It's going to take a lot of work. And what I like to point out is, so is anything that you've never done before. Like, we weren't taught this from the get, and it's something that yeah, like you might have to put in a little work now, and like you mentioned in terms of like finance, like it's kind of something that like you either pay for it like up front, because I used to honestly just think that organic food was more ingredient more expensive.
Yeah.
I didn't recognize that it meant that it didn't have pesticide sprayed all over it, which sidebar, Monsanto is one of the like main producers of or main controllers of our food. If you look at
Mhm.
these companies like, Nabisco, like Betty Crocker, like all these different companies, they're owned by like one of three like main like mega companies, right? So if that doesn't scare you, that they own like,
Yeah, yeah.
most of our food supply, we can have a conversation about that. But
Right.
Monsanto also, sidebar, used to produce Agent Orange. Why is this company that used to produce, a chemical that was used in warfare, like making my food, like
Exactly.
making
Exactly.
the pesticides that go or sprayed like onto my foods?
Mhm.
And one of the things too that I this is super off topic, but important, I think, to note that the purpose of one of the pesticides is to make the insect's gut explode, right? And that's how they die.
Mhm.
And, when you relate that to the fact that like all these people who have like like intestinal concerns now, like
Mhm.
digestive concerns, it makes me wonder,
Mhm.
well, if that was the intention of this and I'm eating all this food that has had it like sprayed on it, if you watch anything about like Monsanto, they wear like bee suits, they wear like hazmat like suits like to spray these
Seen it.
chemicals on the foods that you're putting in your mouth.
I've seen it. I've seen it.
So yeah, and these are things that, to your point about seeking help, like you can learn them on your own, like they're there. You can look up GMO studies, look up the ones about the rats, like you
Yeah.
can like do these things, but at the same time, like it's a lot and it's overwhelming, and it is best to it's the most valuable use of time to work with a professional. Josh is a great like wealth of knowledge, and they can direct you on like, hey, like these are where you can, these are some places where you can read more information about this if
Mhm.
this is something you're interested in, and also these are some things to start you on your journey in terms of like guidelines, which we've gone over high level version of several of them today, but again, this is just like a very much like basic like like you need to know this stuff kind of
Yeah.
thing. um
Exactly.
yeah, anyway, that was all I had to say. All right, I'm out.
Oh no, you're good. I'll kind of like, I guess we'll sort of wrap this up, and I'll kind of lead in that way. But we talked about doctors earlier who, most doctors aren't, trained in nutrition, but they do know your medical history. So always talk with your doctor. Always consult with your doctor. If they can't or get there's certain tests that you should be getting, like lipid profile tests that you should ask your doctor about, and that is a very important test that you should get the older you get. If your doctor is not knowledgeable in nutrition, like have the conversation with them and just tell them like, hey, this is where you're at, in your life and your health. And if they can help you, awesome, that's great. If they can't help you, I'm sure they know someone that can. And obviously, we're here to help. We know people. I can help. Johnny can help. And there's so many things that are accessible to help us build that foundation to health. But you always want to consult with your doctor because they know your health history, they know you, et cetera, et cetera. I guess the last thing, like, I just really want to say is that, how you feel physically, how you feel mentally, your health currently, your health in the future, all of that is dependent upon your lifestyle. There's a study, and it's called the Danish twin study, where they studied, I can't remember. Let me Google it real quick, because if I say the wrong number, I'm going to be mad at myself.
I haven't heard this study. The
So
dangerous
the
one
Danish
study.
twin study, they studied a group of twins. I just wanted 2,872 sets of twins. And so the purpose of the study was to find out if your genetics played, hold on, I don't want to get this wrong. And I probably should have done this earlier to be better prepared, but it is what it is.
Okay, we're here now. While you're doing that, I'm going to pop in and talk about next steps. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. So if anything that we have said today has made you go, oh, I didn't really know about that thing, then, you could be like left sitting there like, whoa, like that was a lot, like where do I start? Right. So we just popped on here a few options. So Josh is offering free 30-minute consultations where he can talk to you specifically about like, what your goals are and how he can help. What I put on here is to take one thing that you want to do today and act on it. Whether that be, like Josh was saying, like start small, which is how we create change. And that goes more into like the mental component of it, because regardless of your intentions, like your body's going to do what is familiar, right? Like it's what it's built to do. And we can talk about that like later. But if you take one action today, then you're going to go ahead and start to create that habit that's going to actually lead towards that change. So whatever that is for you, whatever's doable, whatever you can commit to, take that one action today. And then follow us online. Joshua James is Josh's Instagram. Soul Searching Squats is mine. Josh posts a lot of great nutritional information. He uses like research studies, and he posts a lot of like that. I post more like mental health, like awareness type of stuff. So those are some options, like next steps, if you are wondering like where to get started. Did you find the study?
I did, and I should have remembered it because that's easy, 80-20, like the 80-20 rule. But they found that your health, your longevity in life, like all of that, 80% your lifestyle, 20% genetics. And so a lot of times we can hear, like, oh, like I'm just genetically this way, or like, hey, I'm prone to heart disease, or I'm prone to these, but you actually do have more control over your health than you actually think you do. So there's that 80-20 rule. And so I'm saying all that to say that what you eat, what you put in your body, um, affects how you feel, your health and everything present, but also future, and to not um, to not have that cognitive dissonance when it comes to the current and the future, because it's easy right now to be like, oh, I love these foods, I love eating them, but just understanding that it will affect you 10, 20, 30 years down the line. It's inevitable. It's facts. It is proven. And so, if you want to live a healthy, long life, feel better, a whole foods diet, eating real foods is the way to go, and avoiding fake processed foods.
And with that being said, We've got a few minutes for questions. Very, very few. So if anyone has any questions, do let us know. You can use the Q&A. You can type them in the chat. I know really quick, one that had been asked before this was, what are some things that we can eat for our immunity? We talked about, COVID a bit, and we touched on that. So like, what are some of those foods that are immunity boosting?
So it's going to be surprisingly, like we always think of like orange juice or like oranges and fruit. But the foods that are high in the nutrients that we need to boost our immune system are things like broccoli, spinach, Brussels sprouts. These are things that are going to have all the vitamins and minerals that our immune system needs. It's not just one, it's not just vitamin C or vitamin D. Like they have literally all the vitamins that our immune system needs. So greeny vegetables, fruits too as well, and whole foods. Omega-3s are awesome. We mentioned omega-6, didn't have time to talk about omega-3s, but omega-3s are good for you too, as well as far as your immune system is concerned. And those are found in fatty fishes like salmon, mackerel. They're also found in flax seeds and other things, but I think most people would rather get it from like fish.
Yeah. All right, cool. And don't you have a really good recipe for Brussels sprouts, right?
I do. It's like my favorite. I think just the goat cheese is what makes it.
Oh yeah. What was it? You put them in the air fryer?
Air fryer. So I do olive oil, lemon, pepper, turmeric, salt, air fry 'em, put goat cheese on top of them.
Well,
Super simple, but
I tell you, I started making them with like some liquid aminos, coconut aminos, whatever you want, and then sauteing them with that, a little garlic and like fresh chopped ginger, a
that
little bit of
sounds good.
oil. Yeah, that's like,
I haven't had some fresh ginger in a minute.
right. I'm like, whenever I thought of that, I'm like, what have you been doing with your life? Like, why haven't you been eating this like more? But yeah. All right. Well, we are almost out of time. So, Josh, where can people find you?
IG. That's where I don't spend too much time on social media, but if I'm anywhere, it's gonna be Instagram. So, like, if you got any questions or anything, like if you need help with anything, just DM like that. Like that's why I'm here. Like I've gotten to the point that I know, the time that I've taken and in getting higher education in this, like that it's not common knowledge to people. And so I want to make it common knowledge. So if there's something that you have a question about, or you're wondering about, or you may need help about, just shoot me a DM and I'll help in any way that I can.
Yeah, because you mentioned you have certifications in, remind me again.
So nutrition coaching. And so, one I had for a long time, but the newest one I got was from Cornell, which is like a 6-month program that is amazing and has taught me a lot.
Yeah, whenever you were like, oh, I'm like, no one, I'm like, Josh is a very big someone. So yeah, thank you I wanted to make sure that did not go unsaid.
I'm a nobody. I'm a
No,
nobody.
you are definitely somebody. So
I'm just here to help. That's all.
yeah, and that's important. We need more people like Josh James in our world right now. So
I
thank
appreciate
you.
that. No,
Um,
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for this gift that you have given us. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you everyone for watching. I left out over there. You can find me Soul Searching and Squats on Instagram, and then I Squat for Pancakes online. Yeah, slide into Josh's DMs if you have any questions. I'm here as well. If you want to, if you want to learn more about anything, just want to like continue the conversation, we are here to do that. Like Josh said, this isn't to like judge anyone. It is very much to provide you with this knowledge that like we never got personally. And we feel that it is important that everyone else has it readily available to them as well. Is there anything you would like to add? Closing thoughts?
No, that is it. Just thank you for your time. Thank you for, the stuff that you share. Mental health is extremely important. And I think the two coincide.
They absolutely coincide. So yeah, thank you for that as well. And yeah, we could have a whole nother conversation about how like the micronutrients in the foods like help your
We
brain
honestly
actually
could have.
function.
We could have talked until I had to go to the Conor McGregor fight. Like we
Yeah.
could have talked until like 6 p.m.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's always a pleasure talking with you and learning what you have to say and hearing what you have to say. And just, I'm so grateful. So thank you very much.
I appreciate
And I'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.